In the half-light of an abandoned playground, two strangers lie bound to a rusted merry-go-round, each bearing the scars of the past they thought long buried. Agent Julian Mercer arrives to find not a random killer, but an artist of vengeance, the Curator, who frames his victims in chilling tableaux of childhood photographs and shattered mirrors. As Mercer peels back layer after layer of cryptic symbols, from sealed therapy files to inverted triangles scrawled in blood, he realizes this is more than a hunt for a murder. It's a race to reclaim his own fractured memory before it becomes the curator's final masterpiece. It dives into reflections of the unseen and joins Julian Mercer as he confronts his deepest wounds, unravels a ritualistic gallery of sins, and risks everything to expose the face he's tried so hard to forget. A Julian Mercer thriller, Reflections of the Unseen. Chapter 1: The Silent Carousel. Julian Mercer stood at the edge of the abandoned playground, the evening sun slanting through the skeletal branches of oak trees that circled the rusted merry-go-round. He inhaled the sharp tang of broken glass and damp concrete, his gaze fixed on the first body, face down atop the cold metal spokes. Around her throat, delicate fingers of rope knotted with clinical precision. In her jacket pocket, a faded photograph, a little girl in pigtails, clutching a ragged teddy bear, eyes gouged out with jagged strokes. Mercer crouched, careful not to disturb anything. He noted the victim's age, mid-30s, and the way the rope's fibers splayed across her collarbone in silent accusation. His mind skimmed through dozens of crime scene images, mental overlays that teased out meaning. The broken wood of the swing set behind her as if echoing childhood nightmares. The surrounding spray-painted walls, graffiti half erased. Nothing political here. No manifesto, no slogans, just a personal message. He glanced at Detective Lena Ortiz, her features tight with concentration. She knelt beside the victim, photographing the photograph from every angle. Mercer appreciated her thoroughness. When he spoke, it would be questions that cut deeper than any flashbulb. "Did you collect the CCTV yet?" he asked softly. She lifted her head. "Only static. Cameras shot out weeks ago. But I did find this." She handed him a scrap of cafeteria wrapper, bright red foil, a logo he didn't recognize. Same brand, found on victim 2. Mercer traced the foil's torn edge with a finger. Good. He's already thinking ahead. He stood and let the warm breeze ruffle his trench coat. The playground felt suspended in time, as though the world outside had moved on and left these two bodies behind. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing the second scene. Last night, a man pinned the same way on the merry-go-round's rusted platform, photograph tucked into his jacket. This one, a black and white snapshot of a chubby toddler with smudged cheeks. Mercer's pulse quickened. These weren't random victims, they were curated. He knelt once more, fingertips brushing the girl's photograph. Each scratch around those gouged eyes spoke of rage, personal, intimate. He imagined the killer's hands trembling as he carved them out, his breath hot on printed paper. Mercer shivered despite the sun. "Did we get prints from the photo?" he asked. Ortiz shook her head. "Too degraded, but the rope, industrial grade, custom cut lengths. No retail packaging. This guy sources everything himself." Mercer turned, scanning the empty swings, and the tilted slide. His chest tightened. He'd seen this before. A murderer obsessed with erasing the past, convinced that if he destroyed others' memories, he might fix his own. He reached for his notebook, sketched a quick diagram, bodies on consecutive nights, same positioning, same playground, two victims, two photographs, two shattered lives. He tapped the page with his pen. The symmetry was deliberate. "He's taunting us," Mercer said, "saying, 'I choose who deserves to be unseen.'" Ortiz watched him. "What do you think the photos mean?" He exhaled slowly. "Childhood. Something he wants us to see and to believe." The eyes scratched out aren't just an image, they're a statement. You did not see what matters. He closed his notebook. "We need to find a link between these two photographs, and fast." She nodded and rose, tucking her camera away. Mercer followed her back toward the police line. Each step echoed in his mind. A father's face haunted by loss. A child's laugh silenced before it could ring true. He recalled his own missing memories, files erased after his crisis negotiation days, details he'd buried, faces he tried to forget. At the edge of the tape, a uniformed officer approached. "Agent Mercer, Chief wants you back at the headquarters. He says you'll want to see this." He handed over a tablet displaying enhanced images of the two photos side by side. As Mercer zoomed in, the sharp scratches revealed a second etching, almost imperceptible lines forming a symbol, a simple triangle, its apex pointing down. Mercer's breath caught. He'd studied cult symbologically during his academy years, but never seen this arrangement. "Run it through the database," he said, voice low. "Check obscure sects, fringe therapy programs, anything." The officer tapped a few buttons. Ortiz hovered behind Mercer, eyes narrowed. Together, they watched as the system churned. Minutes passed like hours, the screen blinking at them in silence. Finally, a result popped up. References to a defunct art therapy collective called The Unseen, active 2 decades ago in a suburb just outside of DC. Mercer's shoulders stiffened. "The Unseen," he murmured. He remembered a news article, a headline about parents who lost children in a playground accident, blaming the program for encouraging them to let go of their trauma. The group disbanded after a scathing investigation. Files sealed. Everyone moved on, Mercer whispered. But it never really ended. He met Ortiz's gaze. The killer's tapping into something that's already buried, something people paid to forget. She frowned. "So he's resurrecting past horrors, dragging them into the open." Mercer nodded, teeth pressed together. "And if he wants us to piece it all together, we better start digging into those old records. I'll need a list of every member, past and present. Trace their whereabouts. This is personal for him, and soon it might be for us, too." Behind them, the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the playground in twilight. The merry-go-round spokes glinted like skeletal fingers in the fading light. Mercer felt an old ache, one he thought he'd conquered, stir within him. He glanced at the photo again, the little girl's scratched-out eyes, demanding to be seen. He folded the tablet away. "Let's go," he said. "Tonight we start unraveling the curator's gallery." Ortiz followed him down the cracked pathway, police lights painting long shadows across the empty swings. Mercer's mind raced through memories he'd hidden. If he was going to stop this killer, he'd had to face them all. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The First Restoration. I remember the night I first noticed her. Bright hair like spun gold against the dull hum of fluorescent lights in the bus terminal. Most people never look up from their phones, but she did. Looked all around as if searching for someone she'd lost. I watched her from the shadows, memorizing the curve of her jaw, the crease by her dimples, the way she clutched her purse strapped tight enough to blanch her fingers. I knew then she would be the first. It was late October. The leaves had dyed 1,000 brittle deaths, littering the sidewalks with forgotten color. I had followed her off the bus, maintaining distance but feeling closer than any of her acquaintances ever would. I traced her steps through dimly lit side streets, past eyesores of boarded up storefronts and flickering neon signs. Nobody saw me. Nobody cared. Everyone was too busy polishing their own reflections to notice the cracks around theirs. She paused outside a closed bakery, pressing her forehead against the glass as though she could will the door to open. A photograph in her hand. I recognized its edges straight away. I had studied databases of family portraits, archived therapy session prints, even old newspapers. Her photo was an early family portrait. Her father in a suit that swallowed his frame, her mother's arms wrapped protectively around her small shoulders. She must have carried it for years. She pressed the photograph between her clavicle and the glass, and I watched the portrait's tiny face stare back through the smudged pane. When she left the terminal that night, she left behind a fragment of her past I had pried loose. I slipped forward and scooped the photo from the ledge. The edges were sharp against my palm, an artifact of childhood she thought she'd buried. But I knew better. You never truly bury that which shaped you. I studied the photograph under the flicker of the street lamp, noting the child's wide eyes. I almost felt sorry for her, the way life had scraped innocence from their surface. But pity is a luxury for the weak. I was neither weak nor innocent. My purpose was precision. By the time I placed the shredded wrapper in my pocket, a remnant of the candy bar she'd bought at the terminal kiosk, I had formed a plan. I would give her an offering, a restoration of what she had lost, the stifling guilt of her parents' disappointment, the only image she could cling to when reality had turned her world to dust. I traced my fingers over the printed photograph later, back at my apartment as I prepared my tools. Industrial rope cut to exact lengths, surgical blades sharpened to a whisper, archival pins polished to a mirror sheen. Every implement had its role in the ceremony I envisioned. The gallery would be flawless. I slept fitfully that night. My dreams jumbled between moments of warmth and cruel laughter. Yet, when dawn came, I rose with calm I hadn't felt in years. I folded the little girl's portrait into a sterilized envelope, carrying it like a seed destined to root in fresh soil. Then I drove north to the abandoned playground, the way one might carry a letter to a dead friend. The merry-go-round sat silent, half swallowed by overgrown grass, its bright paint faded to a ghostly pastel. I tested the spokes, each spin whispering protest in rusted symphony. When she arrived, she startled me. She stood beneath an oak branch, watching the carousel as though it might skip to life. I approached her slowly, my steps measured, never enough to raise suspicion, only enough to remind her of my presence. Her breath caught when she saw me, a tremble in her spine, but she didn't run. That recognition, the moment she realized the past is never truly buried, was my true triumph. I led her on to the platform, explaining softly that this place was sacred to me, that I wanted her to understand why the photograph mattered before I set her free from its burden. Her eyes widened, and she tugged at her scarf as though she shielded herself from my words. I could almost taste her fear, metallic on my tongue. She tried to speak, to explain who I was, but words falter when the heart beats too loud. I slipped the photograph from its envelope, unfolding it gently, revealing the little girl's face. I asked her if she remembered that moment, if she recalled the promise her parents made to protect her forever. Her lips trembled, but she remained silent. That silence confirmed it. She did not remember, or worse, she chose to forget. I placed the photograph against her jacket lapel, pinning it with my polished steel pin. She flinched as the metal pierced the fabric, but I held her still. "Look at her," I said, voice calm as snowfall. "She deserves to see." She saw. I saw the flash of recognition in her eyes, twisting into shame, then guilt. I saw it break her. Good. She needed that break. It was only after she was broken that I would set her free. I tied her wrists behind her back with the industrial rope, precise, neat, clinical. The fibers ate into her skin, reminding her of the bonds she let slip away in trust. She whimpered once, a small petulant sound that reached deep into me. I turned the rope's end into an art form, every coil, every knot, a silent message of restitution. Finally, I positioned her face down on the merry-go-round's metal spokes, aligning her arms so that her fingers bled into the rust. The photograph lay beside her, eyes gouged clean away, a statement of what she'd chosen to ignore, the innocence she had abandoned. I stepped back and studied my work. The playground was empty, the sky a burning smear of dusk. Police tape and flashing lights would come soon enough, but for now, it was just me and my gallery. I tucked the empty envelope into my pocket and walked away, each step carrying the weight of a promise kept. Tomorrow, they would find her and call it tragedy. They would wonder who could commit such an act. They would ask for patterns, manifestos, politics. They would never understand the soft cruelty of a mind determined to restore what was lost. And that was the power I wielded, the quiet conviction that, in exposing hidden truths, I freed my victims and myself. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Figure in the Frame. Agent Lena Ortiz sat before the flickering monitor in the makeshift command center, the glow illuminating her furrowed brow. Two feeds played side by side, one from the bus terminal where the first victim paused, and one from the coffee shop 3 blocks away where the second victim had lingered. Both cameras had been dead for weeks, or so the patrol logs said. Yet here they were, grainy but alive, as if someone had slipped new tapes into the recorder. She replayed the first clip, frame by frame. The little girl's photograph trembled in the victim's hand as she tucked it between her coat and a glass door. A flash of color, a red wrapper, fluttered to the ground. Ortiz froze the frame, noting how the breeze lifted the foil before the woman stooped to retrieve it. She zoomed in. There, for a single pixelated moment, a shadow fell across the glass behind the victim, a presence Too deliberate, too placed. She switched to the second feed. The man took that same stretch of pavement, photograph in breast pocket, glancing over his shoulder as he moved. A flicker at the edge of the frame, the same shadow, this time hovering near an alleyway. The man quickened his pace, pulling his jacket tighter. Ortiz pressed play, heart hammering as she watched him disappear into the shot. Got something? Mercer's voice came over the earpiece, low but urgent. Two different cameras, same rogue footage inserted, she replied without looking away. Shadow person, watch. She hit the cue mark, isolating the frames. Mercer's breath crackled. Pause on the second clip. Frame 143. Ortiz complied. Freeze it. Zoom 60%. Enhance edge contrast. He always asked for impossible enhancements. Sometimes she half believed he could read pixels with his mind. When the shapes were solved, her throat tightened. It wasn't a man, exactly, more of a silhouette wearing a hooded jacket, hands tucked into pockets, feet planted a little too still. Whoever recorded these scenes had gone through the trouble of looping old footage and slipping in new frames to suggest surveillance continuity. This was deliberate misdirection, but to what end? She scrubbed through older archives of the terminal and coffee shop, looking for patterns. A janitor's trolley, a delivery bike, a uniformed guard. Nothing. Each clue fizzled into static. Yet the red wrapper appeared in both cases. She marked it on her whiteboard, connecting to the scrap Mercer found at the playground. Foil wrapper of unknown origin, she muttered. Mercer's voice cut in again. Lena, any sign of the photograph's provenance? Could they have survived the camera's failure? She paused the feeds and pulled up the victim's case files on her other screen. Both photos were professional prints from the 80s, an age before digital, before Insta profiles. I cross-referenced developers in the area, found two labs that existed back then. One closed in 1992, the other relocated uptown. I'm pinging their archives now. Good. See if any prints from the bath. Good. See if any prints from the. Good. See if any prints from that batch went missing. Mercer sounded almost hopeful, an odd inflection for a man used to dead ends. Ortiz leaned back, massaging her temples. She thought of the first victim's eyes, carved out in rage, and the second, equally scarred, equally silent. They'd been chosen not randomly, but for something in their past they couldn't escape. She scrawled in red marker, pattern equals childhood, betrayal, eraser, underlined it twice. A soft ping announced a new email, an encrypted message from the forensic lab. She opened it, scanning the attachments, a list of print orders from 1987 to 1992, including a series labeled simply Family Series Batch 4. The printer IDs matched the chemical residue on the photographs recovered at both scenes. She flagged the batch number and forwarded the list to Mercer. Looks like he sourced these prints from the same original batch, she reported. That lab was shut down after a chemical leak killed 3 employees. Files were sealed by the city. Mercer was silent. Then, the unseen? He said, almost to himself. Ortiz frowned. You see it too? He sighed. Group called the Unseen ran art therapy workshops in the late 80s. Parents brought their kids here to release trauma. They were supposed to scratch away the guilt. Seems our killer took that literally. She shuddered. So he's punishing the victims for forgetting or not forgetting their traumas? Exactly. And the surveillance footage implies he's and the surveillance footage implies he's orchestrating this from behind the lens. Mercer's voice hardened. He's watching them lead up to their deaths, studying their reactions. Ortiz glanced back at the monitors. In the first feed, the victim paused under a flickering lamp. In the second, the victim glanced over at the door as if sensing someone. What if the killer had been there all along, unseen until the moment of execution? She swallowed. Then we need to track equipment. Who'd have access to these closed networks? Maintenance crews, CCTV installers, anyone who could bypass security protocols. Good lead. Mercer's approval felt rare. Ortiz tapped her phone and called dispatch. Pull all contracts for surveillance maintenance over the past month in the terminal, the coffee shop, and half a dozen other public spaces near the playground. She hung up. On it. The monitor shifted to other camera angles Mercer had requested. Nearby pharmacies, laundromats, park benches, places the victims had passed. Ortiz watched for that hooded silhouette. Hours trickled by in silence, broken only by the distant hum of generators and the steady click of her mouse. Finally, as the digital clock flipped to 0234, she caught movement on an overhead feed of the bus terminal. A maintenance worker, broad frame, posture stiff, lingered by the junction box behind the kiosk. He glanced up at the camera, then casually lifted a tool to conceal his hands. Ortiz froze. She marked the time and zoomed the feed. His face was obscured by a low cap, but his gait matched the silhouette from the other clips. She tapped Mercer's earpiece. Agent Mercer, one of your suspects, a maintenance tech, is on site right now at the terminal feed. There was a burst of static. Send me his ID and location. She jotted down the timestamp and camera coordinates, sending him the file. I'm sealing down that zone. Dispatch 2 units on foot. Coordinate with K9 for a sweep. On it, she heard Mercer respond. Ortiz exhaled, posture slumping. She rubbed her eyes, realizing she'd been holding her breath. One suspect didn't make the killer, but he made a lead, and in this case, every lead was precious. She glanced again at the frozen frame, the maintenance worker's toolkit. The same red foil wrapper lay crumpled beside him on the ledge. Her heart thudded. He discarded his evidence, thinking no one would notice. Beyond the screens, dawn was bleeding into the sky. Ortiz leaned forward, resolve settling in her chest. If Mercer's theory was correct, their man would slip into the playground tonight, testing his next victim under moonlight. She tapped out a final message. Suspect identified. Night shift posted at playground. Ready for Mercer's next move. As she hit send, the silhouette on the screen seemed to stiffen, as though sensing discovery. For a moment, Ortiz thought the figure raised his head to look directly at the camera. But then he turned and walked away, swallowed by the labyrinth of corridors that hung behind the terminal's walls. Ortiz stared at the empty feed. The chase had begun, and she wasn't about to let the curator slip through her fingers again. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Second Offering. I watched him the first time at dawn, the steam from his coffee cup dissipating into the chill morning air. He sat alone at a corner table in that pale green cafe, neatly pressed shirt, tie askew, eyes darting between the entrance and his phone screen as if expecting a summons he could neither control nor refuse. He was perfect, a man carrying the weight of quiet failures, burdened by small regrets that haunted him more sharply than any confession. I slipped inside behind him, blending with the morning crowd. His photo lay safe in my pocket, folded like a prayer, a black and white snapshot of a boy, chubby cheeks smudged with chocolate, hair mussed by careless fingers. I remember that portrait from my files, printed in a dusty box labeled Family Series Batch 4. He, too, had been part of the unseen experiment. He, too, had scraped at his own edges, begging for mercy no one could grant. I ordered a cappuccino at the counter, then drifted closer. He saved a seat for his photograph, slid it from his breast pocket, and placed it face up on the table, as though seeking comfort in his blank stare. I recognized the tremor in his fingers. He was trying to feel something real before the day swallowed him whole. When he left, I followed, leaving my own discarded wrapper on the table, a small gift he would later associate with my arrival. He walked 2 blocks east, past greengrocers and park delivery vans, then turned onto Wilshire Avenue. Perfect. Exactly the winding route I had mapped. There was a narrow alley between a shuttered laundromat and a faded mural of children playing. I stepped into the shadows. He paused at the alley entrance, glanced over his shoulder as though sensing me. My heart thrummed. Anticipation, always anticipation, until I saw the stuck in place horror in his eyes. I emerged, arms raised in mock surrender, voice gentle. Pardon me, sir, you dropped this. I held up his photograph. The little boy's smile bright and cruel in the spring sunshine. He swallowed, hands clenching the tables he left behind. Thank you, he whispered. Are you remember this place? I asked, voice soft as confession. I think we were here once, long ago. I pointed to the mural across the street, children spinning on painted merry-go-rounds. I used to watch kids laugh here. Then one day they left. The laughter was never the same. He shook his head. I don't think so. His eyes flicked to mine, searching for deception. I stepped closer, measuring the distance that gave him hope. Come with me, I said, guiding him into the alley. I want to show you something. Fear made his steps reluctant, but he followed, drawn by that silent promise of revelation. At the alley's end, I'd arranged my tools, a coil of industrial rope, surgical blades laid on steel tray, and his photograph inside a clear envelope pinned to the brick wall. I watched as he recognized it, eyes widening, breath catching in his throat. That's mine, he said. Your past, I whispered. You kept it hidden, hoping it'd vanish. But here it is, untouched by time. Tell me, do you remember the promise made to you? The vow that you'd be safe as long as you stayed inside the lines? His lip trembled. He backed away, but the walls stopped him. His notebook, bulky with appointment reminders, slid from his hand. I caught it before it hit the ground. Words matter, I said, flipping through pages crowded with bullet points. But what matters more is what you didn't write, the corners you folded away, the nights you stayed up, wondering if forgiveness could really come. I held his gaze. I'm here to set you free. He trembled, tears tracking lines through his stumble. I felt nothing but clarity, calm precision. This was my gift. Absolution through the erasure of memory. I pinned his childhood photograph to his jacket chest, mirroring the neat angle from the first tableau. His fingers bled through the fabric. He gasped as the steel tip bit into his lapel. Good. Let him feel something. Then I bound his wrists behind his back with industrial rope. Each knot was deliberate. No slack, no mercy. His spine arched in silent protest, but I held him steady. Close your eyes, I instructed. Trust me. He shut them, tears wet against the dark cloth. I led him to the playground when the sky had softened to dusk. The merry-go-round waited, half gone to rust, its spokes like skeletal fingers reaching toward the cold grass. I positioned him face down atop it, arms splayed so his fingers dripped into the metal grates. His ragged breath whispered against my neck. I pressed the envelope, photograph visible, into his hand. "Remember," I said, voice low, "you are more than the sum of your failures." Then, with finality, I torqued the ropes until he stilled. His tears ceased. His past settled into the world, raw and exposed. I stepped back and studied the scene. The man, the photograph, the broken carousel. Two offerings now, two souls I had liberated. Only one remained. I tucked my notebook into my coat and slipped away. Footsteps light against the fallen leaves. Tomorrow they would find him in Twilight's hush and call it monstrosity. They would speak of madness, not mine, but his. And in their stunned questions, I would hear the truth that redemption is a gift not given, but earned in the erasure of everything you once treasured. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5, Fractured Reflections. Julian Mercer stood before the bank of illuminated sketches in the makeshift command center, each forensic artist's rendering pinned to a matte board. Under stark lights, two ghostly portraits stared back at him, fragments of childhood captured in pencil strokes, the faces from the photographs he'd recovered, now tentatively reconstructed. Their eyes looked whole again, though a trio of diagonal scars marred each cheek. He traced a finger along the curve of the better-known victim's reconstructed countenance, studying the tremor in the artist's graphite. The eyes, now intact, seemed both accusing and pleading. Mercer pictured the gouged originals, the way the curator had slid them away as though erasing truth itself. But here, before him, was hope of restoration. Detective Lena Ortiz lingered at his shoulder, clutching her tablet. "These match the victims' childhood birthdays," she said quietly, tapping the file. "Both born on November 21st, 3 years apart." Mercer nodded, flicking his gaze to the second portrait. "And the scars, notice how they align with the scratch patterns on the original photos." He circled the cheek marks. "He's recarving them into their faces now, like he's tagging his work." Ortiz scrolled through digital reconstructions of the playground photos, "which means he's moved from erasure to alteration. He isn't just punishing them for forgetting, he's rewriting their past." Mercer's jaw clenched. "He wants us to see the damage he's done and the ones we haven't." He tapped the board, aligning the portraits beneath a third image, his own childhood photo, retrieved from sealed FBI archives. He hadn't intended to share it, but the curator had drawn him into the gallery by leaking a blurry shot of it to a local news site. In the photo, Mercer was 7, gripping a tattered teddy bear in his mother's arms. His eyes, small and nervous, locked onto the camera with both fear and defiance. Ortiz followed his gaze. "Your picture." He exhaled. "He's baiting me." He reached to remove it, but paused. "No, leave it. I want to see how he's mapped my own reflection against these victims." Lena swallowed. "You think you're next?" He offered a wry half smile. "More likely I'm part of his next piece." He flipped through the curator's latest hatch. An envelope arrived this morning, delivered to headquarters with no fingerprints. Inside lay a broken mirror shard, the edges smeared with faint blood. Alongside it, a post-it note in the curator's precise block letters reading, "Reflect to reveal." She recoiled. God. Mercer slipped the shard into a glove box, careful not to contaminate it. He's escalating from photographs to flesh to the very tools that record our faces. He met Ortiz's eyes. We need to understand the symbolism before he frames his next tableau. She leaned in. The Unseen's handbook mentioned mirror work. Therapists had clients gaze into mirrors to confront hidden selves. Precisely. Mercer crossed to the whiteboard and sketched a simple diagram. Two circles overlapping a triangle. We have the photograph's triangle symbol scratched into each photo. Now he uses shards, the shattered mirror of identity. He connected the diagram's points: childhood, trauma, reflection. He's constructing an equation: memory plus pain equals revelation. Lena scrawled beneath it: find the missing variables. Mercer strode to the archives corner. He's recreating the Unseen's therapy sessions, but his treatments kill. He rifled through the sealed boxes of case notes from the defunct program, scattered reports now dust covered and half forgotten. Look here, he said, pulling a brittle file. Session logs where children were asked to draw self portraits blindfolded, and if they refused, therapists recommended forced exposure to see truth, they wrote. Ortiz frowned. That's unethical. Mercer's expression turned hard. They tore open children's defenses. Our killer took that permission slip, twisted it into license for murder. He flipped to a passage highlighted in yellow ink. Expose the unseen wound by removing the shield of denial. Mercer's eyes narrowed. He's not just punishing victims, he's treating them with fatal doses of therapy. Lena nodded. So where does he strike next? Mercer tapped the mirror shard. The final step must involve actual reflection. He'll force his next victim to look into broken glass, into themselves, before he restores them. He turned to the map of the playgrounds dotted around DC. He's used our abandoned park twice. What site involves mirrors? Old Funhouse? Carnival Mirrors? But the city's only indoor one closed decades ago. Ortiz pointed at a district on the map. There is an old photographer's studio uptown, built 1920s, full-length antique mirrors, long since shuttered, but still intact. Mercer's gaze locked onto the pinpoint, the house of reflections. He tapped it 3 times. He wants to transmute the victim's fractured memories through shattered reflections there. She exhaled. We need to sweep that location now. He shook his head. Not yet. If we storm in early, he'll know we're onto him. We'll lose the gallery's grand finale. He ran a hand through his hair. Instead, we must find a trigger. What link ties these two victims and me? Ortiz hesitated. Their birthdays? Childhood trauma? Mine too? Mercer's face softened briefly. Lena, why did you come back from enforcement to behavioral division? She blinked. My partner died on duty. I couldn't shake the thought that if I'd been better at reading him, his fears, he might still be alive. Mercer's shoulders dipped. He knew the weight of guilt. We buried our mistakes in work. He gestured to the sketches. The curator exhumes them. Silence fell as they shared the ache of past losses. Then Mercer squared his shoulders. He's built his gallery on our shared scars. To stop him, we must face ours. She met his gaze. What do you need? He stepped to the board, drew a circle around their 3 names: Victim 1, Victim 2, and Julian Mercer. I need you to dig into my file. Everything sealed. Session logs, therapy notes, contact lists. I need to know who had access to my memory. Ortiz's eye widened. Chief's going to flip when he sees that request. Mercer shrugged. Let him. If he wants results, he'll authorize it. He exhaled. And I'll convene the artist, Dr. Keyes. He sketched his portraits. Ask him what he remembers about my session 14 years ago. Lena straightened, resolve hardening. I'll get to Clarence. Mercer turned, gaze drifting back to the mirror shard like a beckoning abyss. Then we'll wait for the invitation. Ortiz glanced at the sketches one more time before rising. Until then, we prepare for the final unveiling. Mercer crossed to the window, watching traffic blur by. His reflection fractured across the glass, multiple Mercers overlapping in ghostly overlap. He pressed a fingertip to the pane. I see you, he whispered to his own reflection. Now I need you to help me see him. Outside, the city hummed unaware. Inside, a symphony of shattered truth waited for its conductor. End of chapter 5. Chapter 6. Beneath the Metal Spokes. I always return to the merry-go-round, even when the moon hides behind clouds and the playground is empty of sound. I feel its pulse, rusted heartbeats echoing through the spokes. Tonight, I kneel in the cold grass, unspooling the rope from around my shoulders. I brought new lengths, braided to remind me of my promise that nothing stays buried forever. I press my palm against the chipped paint, tracing the arc where metal meets metal. I remember when I was 7, perched atop that very platform. My father had promised to teach me how to spin. Instead, he left me there alone, wobbling on the last turn before the world went dark. His footsteps receded into the distance as my breath shuffled in ragged whispers. I clawed at the spokes, trying to stop the ride, but it carried me away. By the time someone found me, I was covered in blood and tears. They said it was an accident, a loose bolt, a moment of carelessness. But I saw the way his boots hesitated at the edge of the gravel, heard his soft exhale before he vanished. He taught me that abandonment tastes like gasoline, hot, slick, and impossible to wash off. I carried that lesson in my bones for years. Tonight, I dig my fingers into the earth beneath the merry-go-round, searching the soil for shards of memory. The ground gives way to cool dampness, and I uncover a shard of mirror I stashed here long ago, mirror from the house where the therapy sessions once echoed. I hook my thumbnail under the edge and I pry it loose, careful not to nick my skin. The mirror quivers in my hand, reflecting the sky's fractal lights. I hold it to my face. In the reflection, I see the boy with the chubby cheeks, the one who never learned to spin without fear. His eyes flicker sideways, searching for a familiar shape in the darkness. I lean closer, bringing the mirror under the spoke's shadow, until each twisted metal spoke frames a fragment of my reflection. It feels like I'm splitting myself apart, seeing each crack in my own soul. Good. I place the mirror piece among my tools: industrial rope, surgical blade, sharpened pen, and 2 battered photographs from the first offerings. Each tool carries its own purpose, a vow to finish what began long ago. I breathe in the smell of oil and dew, tasting the night's hush on my tongue. The first victim arrived right on schedule, the red-wrapped woman who clutched her childhood portrait like a lifeline. I remember watching her in the terminal, the way she flinched when lights flickered, as though anticipating something terrible. I slipped my face into her reflection that night, pinning her gaze with the broken shards until she remembered what she tried so hard to forget. The second came at dusk, the man with the tie askew. He crouched beside the playground mural, unaware of the ceremony I had prepared. When I pinned his photograph to his lapel, his eyes welled with relief. He thought I was a familiar face. He didn't realize that mercy can be the cruelest lie. Now there's only one left, the architect of this hunt, the profiler who thinks he understands me, Julian Mercer. He studies me through sealed reports, sealed photos, sealed memories. He's certain he can track me through my own reflections. So I leave clues for him, numbers scratched on walls, envelope slips in his inbox, shards of mirror indicating the next tableau. The air shifts. A breeze ruffles the grass. I flatten myself beneath the carousel, pressing my ear against the cold ring. I listen for footsteps, the scrape of shoes, a sign that someone else had come to witness my work. In the darkness, I can almost hear Mercer's voice, low and precise, asking questions he already knows the answers to. I whisper to the earth, as though sharing secrets with an old friend. I'm not your enemy, I'm your heir. The wind carries my words through the spokes, scattering them into the night. My hands find a rope again, coiling it around a length of mirror shard to tie them together, tools and reflections bound as one. This will be my offering to Mercer, a gift of his own making. I will drape his childhood photograph across the spokes here, beneath me, so that when he bends to inspect it, he sees only fragments of himself. He'll recall his mother's gentle hands wiping soot from his cheek after a building fire. He'll remember that first taste of smoke in his lungs, the way his heart pounded as she held him close. And he'll know that no matter how many fires he puts out, some memories scorch more deeply than any flame. The air stills. My pulse slows, matching the carousel's quiet drum. I dig again, deeper this time, until my fingers graze something smooth. Another shard I buried long ago, after my father's promise fractured. I lift it, slip it into my pocket. A spare reflection, waiting for Mercer's gaze. I rise, standing beneath the great circle of rusted spokes. The playground is still, but I feel it watching me. Old ghosts trapped in twisted metal. I tap a rhythm on the platform, a Morse code only I understand, and then I step back from the carousel, footsteps measured as I imprint another memory in the ground. When they find the third victim, they will discover my gallery complete. The shadow photographs, the painted symbols, the mirror shards arranged like constellations. They will piece together the locations, the dates, the broken logic that binds them all. And then they will look upward at the marble fragments of who I was and wonder how anyone could do such a thing. But Mercer will understand. In the final tableau, when he kneels beneath the spokes, he will place his own reflection beside mine. And in those fractured images, he will see that we are cut from the same cloth, survivors of an accident that nobody witnessed, molded by wounds that nobody confessed. I pick up my tools and tuck them into my bag, careful not to disturb the scene. One last look at the carousel. The moonlight silhouetting the spokes looks like rows of waiting hands, perfect arms raised in silent plea. I smile, a soft curl of satisfaction, then turn and walk away. They will discover my offering by dawn, and by the time Mercer arrives, he'll know exactly where to find me. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7, Forgotten Friend. Detective Lynn Ortiz sat alone in the dimly lit conference room, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence as she scrolled through Meridian Behavioral Clinic's old personnel rosters. Each name was a ghost, therapists and volunteers who'd vanished when the unseen dissolved. Her eyes locked on one, Dr. Marcus Keyes, Julian Mercer's lead therapist during the crisis negotiation debriefs 14 years ago. Ortiz's heart hammered. If Mercer's childhood friend had ties to the unseen, the curator might be using that bond as bait. She tapped her pen against the folder's manila edges. Mercer had asked her to dig into his sealed files, session notes, contact lists, even his emergency debrief transcripts. Ortiz had resisted at first, exposing Mercer's private trauma risked breaking the one person steady enough to face the curator. But the killer's pattern was clear. He targeted those who shared a history of blunt-edged therapy, of trust betrayed. If Keyes was involved with the unseen, it could be the link that allowed the curator to access Mercer's memories and distort them. She opened the folder marked Mercer 2011 Debrief Archive and found a single yellow envelope labeled Keyes Session Logs. Sliding her finger under the flap, she extracted 4 pages of meticulously typed summaries. Each entry described a group session in which Mercer and 3 other children had drawn self-portraits blindfolded under flickering halogen lights. The final entry from November 21st, 1961, Mercer's 8th birthday, ended abruptly. Dr. Keyes reported that one subject became unresponsive during mirror exposure. Group disbanded. Remaining participants clear for discharge. Ortiz felt ice pool in her stomach. Unresponsive, a clinical euphemism for a breakdown. On his birthday, no wonder Mercer carried sealed files. If Keyes was the one who suggested forced mirror exposure, he'd been the first to fracture Mercer's sense of self. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mercer. Need status ASAP, JM. She exhaled and tapped another line of inquiry. Marcus Keyes in the old social media archive they resurrected for this case. The search yielded a lone result. A Keyes Foundation in Virginia offering memory reclamation retreats. It had been active until 1994, then quietly shuttered. Ortiz cross-referenced the Foundation's registration documents and discovered a forwarding address at a townhouse in Alexandria. She stood, grabbing the folder and her tablet. Outside the conference room, officers clustered around printed sketches. The room pulsed with unease. The curator's gallery had become an obsession for every agent on the task force. Ortiz slipped through the door and found Mercer leaning against the wall, arms folded, gaze fixed on the sketches of fractured faces. Found him, Ortiz said, handing over the session logs and the Foundation's details. Mercer scanned the logs, jaw tightening. He closed his eyes. I haven't thought about Keyes in years. His voice was low, distant, as if Keyes' face had eclipsed every memory behind his lids. He was the only one I trusted after the fire. Ortiz placed a hand on his arm. He ran art therapy programs here in DC before the unseen. Mercer's eyes snapped open, haunted. Keyes left town when the unseen imploded. I thought he vanished to rebuild elsewhere. He rubbed his temples. He was my anchor. When they sealed my files, they said Keyes had vouched for confidentiality. Ortiz nodded. I found the Keyes Foundation. I found the Keyes Foundation in Virginia. Memory retreats. He left a paper trail until 1994. Mercer's face went pale. If he's still peddling memory cures, he might be in league with the curator, or worse, the curator himself. She hesitated. You want me to bring him in? Mercer stared at the sketches on the wall, the mirror shards, the triangular symbols, the empty smiles. His voice was barely a whisper. Not yet. He's the only one who can help me reconstruct my own fractured reflections. If I accuse him now, I'll lose my best lead. Ortiz studied him, seeing the lines of guilt carved into his expression. Then we approached him carefully. I'll set up a meeting as though I'm following an unrelated lead on the Foundation, you can observe. He nodded. Ash gray in the fluorescent light. Meet me at the Alexandra townhouse in 2 hours. And Lena, stay sharp. If Keys is involved, he won't slip easily. She slipped the logs into her satchel. Understood. I'll go in cold. The townhouse in Alexandria loomed across a narrow street, its red brick facade half shrouded in ivy. Ortiz parked under a flickering street lamp and walked its length, noting the mailboxes stamped with Keyes' name. The windows were curtained tightly, but a single porch light glowed inside. She flipped open her handheld radio, clicked the record switch, and approached the door. She knocked twice, firm, deliberate. The door cracked open, revealing a gaunt man in his early 60s, thinning silver hair combed back, eyes shadow yet alert. His name tag read Dr. Marcus Keyes. Detective Ortiz? She said. Detective Ortiz, she said, offering her badge. I'm investigating the Keyes Foundation's closure. I wondered if you could spare a few minutes. He studied her for a heartbeat, lips pressing into a thin line. Then he stepped aside. Please come in. The forest smelled of old books and lavender. Ortiz followed him into a parlor filled with floor-to-ceiling shelves holding leather-bound journals. A faded photograph on the mantel showed Keyes with a ragged teddy bear, its button eye missing, the same one Mercer had clutched in his childhood portrait. Ortiz's pulse spiked. She reminded herself to stay professional. I noticed your foundation offered memory reclamation retreats. How did that differ from the Unseen's methods? Key's eyes flickered to the photograph. The Unseen went too far. Forced exposure, blindfolded art therapy. At the Foundation, we used voluntary reflection exercises, mirror work only when the client requested it. I left the Unseen when they began mandating group acclimatization. It felt unsafe. Lena nodded. Do you recall working with Julian Mercer? His face tightened, nostalgia mingling with regret. Julian was bright but withdrawn after the fire. We spent months rebuilding his trust, starting with simple mirror drawings, then graduated exposure. He swallowed. He made more progress than any other patient. That's why it hurt so deeply when the program shut down. Ortiz raised an eyebrow. You said the foundation closed in 1994? Why? Keyes closed his eyes, voice wavering. I lost faith. Clients emerged worse than before, clinging to false memories. I couldn't justify the methods anymore, so I left it all behind. He looked at her, vulnerability raw in his gaze. But I kept the journals, in case Julian ever needed them. Ortiz's chest tightened. If Keyes had those journals, Mercer's sealed files might be redundant. But if someone else had accessed them, the curator, he could weaponize Mercer's memories in a final tableau. She cleared her throat. We're investigating a series of murders linked to the Unseen's therapy. 2 victims so far. Both had photographs scratched, mirror shards found at the scene. We believe the perpetrator is orchestrating a twisted reenactment of those old sessions. Keyes stiffened, white-knuckling the arm of his chair. You think someone's using my techniques to kill? Ortiz nodded. And we need your insight to anticipate his next move. Keyes' breath trembled. He opened his coat and drew out a worn leather journal, the same one from the mantel. These are Julian's early sessions, he said. If you show me the crime scene photos, I can help you decode the symbolism. He handed the journal to Ortiz. As the significance of the gesture settled in, Ortiz realized something unsettling. By trusting him, they'd given Keyes access to both the investigation and Mercer's past. If Keyes was innocent, it could be their greatest ally. But if he wasn't, they just handed the curator the map to every hidden scar. Keyes looked at her, eyes glistening. Let's begin. Ortiz hesitated, tablet in hand, heart pounding with uneasy anticipation. Outside, the townhouse windows gleamed in fading light. A house of memories laid bare. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The Catalogue of Sins. I lay the leather-bound journal open on my desk, the soft crack of its spine like a welcome sigh. Candlelight dances across its pages, illuminating the ink I've spilled over months of preparation. This is not merely a record, it is my magnum opus, the catalogue of sins that each victim carried in their hidden souls. Tonight, I finish it. I flip back to the first entry. Victim 1, name Evelyn Harper, date October 22nd, 1995. Sin, abandonment, claimed her father loved her, then sold her to the streets of his ambition. Each word drips with intention. I recall how her portrait lay trembling in my hand, the woman's warm breath fogging the glass before I pried the photo free. In that moment, I became her confessor and her executioner. I crossed it off with a precise diagonal stroke, as though sealing her absolution. Grace marks the end of each sin. Beneath it, victim 2, name Mark Lowry, date October 23rd, 1995. Sin, denial, believed he could outrun guilt, even as it clogged his every breath. I've drawn a triangle around his name, the apex pointing down. This symbol binds each entry, connecting childhood to confession to ultimate release. My hand trembled slightly as I finished the loop. Anticipation, not fear. Now, the last blank page awaits. Victim 3, name Julian Mercer, date blank, sin blank. I uncork a small vial of ink scented with myrrh, each drop a memory distilled. My eyes drift to the framed mirror shard on the wall, its jagged edge catching the candle's glow. I imagine Mercer kneeling beneath the spokes, staring into broken glass as I whisper his truth back to him. I pick up my quill and breathe in faint aroma of old paper and molten wax. The quill's nib hovers over the empty line. What sin will I assign him? He who treads the narrow path between predator and protector, who has buried his own horrors beneath professional calm. He who thinks he can see me before I see him. I recall the therapy logs from Dr. Keyes' journal, the sessions where Mercer was blindfolded, forced to draw himself, the sessions where Mercer was blindfolded, forced to draw his shadow self, the curator of his own memories. He glimpsed fractures he never named. Tonight I will name them for him. I pressed the quill to the page. Sin, obsession, believed understanding would make him whole, yet each revelation only deepens his fracture. My hand pauses. Does that capture him? Or is it too kind? Perhaps sin, denial, held a mirror of his past, yet kept his eyes averted from the ruin beneath. I draw a light line through obsession and rewrite denial, savoring the subtle cruelty of each syllable. Date. I glanced at my pocket watch. 11:47 p.m. No need for specifics. Mercer will know when he arrives. I scroll November 18th, 1995 in careful numerals. The brush of the quill is final. I close the journal and seal it with red wax, pressing my signet ring into the soft moon. The emblem, a downward pointing triangle, impresses perfectly. This seal will shatter only when Mercer breaks it. My preparations complete, I rise and cross the room to the map pinned on the corkboard. A single pin marks the House of Reflections, its address scrawled beneath: 312 Holbrook Avenue. I drape a length of rope and a small mirror shard over the pin, an invitation in plain sight. I step back, hands clasped behind me, surveying my gallery, the journal, the map, the symbols, each piece whispering its own dark promise. Soon Mercer and Ortiz will decipher these breadcrumbs, tracing my path here. They will feel the thrill of discovery, thinking they control the chase. Yet every clue leads them further into the heart of my design. I will allow myself a thin smile. They believe they pursue a mon. I will allow myself a thin smile. They believe they pursue a monster. But in truth, I have been both patient curator and conductor, arranging memories like notes in a symphony of revelation. Turning off the candles one by one, I leave the room in darkness, save for a single beam of moonlight slicing through the window, illuminating the sealed journal on my desk. Its presence is a silent vow. Tomorrow, the final act. I slip into the hallway, footsteps muffled on the plush carpet. Behind me, the door clicks shut. The catalogue of sins waits to be opened, and when Julian Mercer kneels to read his own indictment, he will understand that some truths can only be revealed in shards. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9: Rays Against Twilight. Julian Mercer's phone buzzed with a single cryptic message: 312 Holbrook Avenue, midnight, come alone. He stood in the center of the command tent, under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, the weight of every unsolved face pressing against his chest. Detective Lena Ortiz glanced up from her laptop. "Is that it?" she asked, voice taut. He tucked the phone into his coat and met her gaze. The curator's final invitation. His fingers brushed the empty spot in his lapel where his childhood photograph had once been, now safely locked away at headquarters. He inhaled, steadying himself. He's laid out his catalog. Tonight, he delivers the grand finale. Outside, the marine layer rolled in, smudging the city lights. Mercer slipped on leather gloves and exited the tent. Ortiz fell into step beside him. "You sure you want to do this alone?" she asked. He paused, looking at her determined face. "I need to confront him directly. No backup." He offered a curt nod. "Be ready." She exhaled sharply but didn't argue. "I'll circle the block. 2 minutes after midnight. I'm inside." He gave a stiff salute and disappeared into the slush of rain-slicked streets. The House of Reflections loomed at the end of Holbrook Avenue, a once grand photographer's studio, its Art Deco facade crumbling beneath peeling paint. The gaudy neon sign sputtered. "Reflections." Mercer approached with measured steps, the umbrella above his head slicing through the drizzle. Each footfall echoed across the cracked sidewalk. He reached the door and found the lock cut, hinges rusted. Pushing it open revealed a cavern of darkness, the air heavy with the musk of mildew and old plaster. A single filament bulb throbbed overhead, casting a pallid glow across shattered mirrors strewn like fallen angels across the hardwood floor. Mercer's breath caught. This was more than a studio. It was a mausoleum of fractured images. Every mirror in the room was cracked or splintered, reflections splintering into jagged slivers of reality. He stepped carefully, eyes scanning for movement. A soft click sounded behind a tattered velvet curtain. Mercer drew his sidearm and advanced. He swept the curtain aside and found a small makeshift stage, a single wooden chair under bare spotlight, a length of industrial rope coiled at its base, and beside it, a sealed letter journal with the curator's red wax triangle. Mercer's heart thudded. He reached for the journal, but a hush of movement froze him in place. The mirror fragments around the chair shifted, and he spotted a shape slipping behind the curtain on the stage far side. He rounded the platform, gun raised. "Mercer," came the curator's voice, soft, almost amused. He stepped into the light, a slender figure in a dark hoodie, the hood tossed back to reveal Marcus Keyes' ashen face. But not alone. Lena Ortiz stood bound to the chair, her wrists secured with the same clinical knots Mercer had seen at every crime scene. A mirror shard balanced precariously on the armrest beside her. Mercer's chest tightened. "Let her go," he commanded, voice steady despite his racing pulse. Keyes tilted his head, lips curving into a thin smile. "Julian Mercer, so good of you to arrive." He gestured to the journal. "Before we begin, would you care to read your indictment?" He released the journal onto the dusty floor. Mercer nodded once and holstered his gun. He knelt, pried the seal, and opened to the final entry. Victim 3, name Julian Mercer, date November 18th, 1995. Sin, denial, held the mirror of his past, yet kept his eyes averted from the ruin beneath. Mercer's breath caught. Keyes' journal mockingly mirrored the curator's seal, but it wasn't Keyes who had signed it. Inside the fold, Mercer spotted fresh ink tracing a second triangle, this one inverted, its apex pointing up. "He's gone beyond the catalog," Mercer whispered. "There are two hands at work." Keyes' expression flickered. "The curator and I share a bond, Julian. He's restoring lost memories. He swallowed. I'm restoring truths you suppressed." Mercer's eyes darted to Ortiz. She met his gaze, a flicker of fear and trust in her eyes. Mercer holstered his doubts. "You framed me," he said, voice low. "You used my therapist's trust to lure me here." He shook his head. "I guided him. His obsession grew too strong. He contacted me weeks ago, convinced I could help him refine his therapy. I thought I could contain him, but then he slipped beyond my reach." Mercer rose, chest heaving. "Where is he?" Keyes gestured upward at the shattered ceiling mirrors. "He's everywhere, nowhere. He's the echoes you chase, your reflection in broken glass." Keyes stepped back towards Ortiz, voice softening. "Let me untie her." Mercer leveled his gun. "You unhand her, or I will." Keyes' shoulders rounded. He took a slow step toward a chair and knelt. His fingers worked the knots, careful not to cut Ortiz's skin. Mercer kept the gun trained on the therapist. When the ropes fell away, Ortiz rubbed her wrists and slipped from the chair. Keyes rose, hands open. "Julian, you see? I'm no killer." Mercer's gaze flicked to the mirror shard on the armrest, an inch of glass smeared with what looked like blood. "He left you tools," Mercer said. "You knew this was coming." Keyes' face paled. "He told me to help prepare the space. I thought he meant the journal. I didn't know." Mercer stepped to Ortiz's side. "Cold K9, sweep the building." His gaze cut back to Keyes. "You'll come with me." Outside, sirens wailed. Mercer tucked Keyes' arm under his, guiding him out. Ortiz raced ahead, phone pressed to her ear. Mercer paused by the threshold, staring at the fractured mirrors one last time. A soft scrape behind him. Mercer spun, gun raised, but saw no one. Just a reflection shifting in the broken glass. His own face fragmented into countless slivers, each shard catching a different emotion: rage, sorrow, guilt. He inhaled and exhaled. The curator was gone, leaving only whispers and fractured reflections. Mercer put his gun away and followed Ortiz into the night. Behind him, the House of Reflections turned to silence, its final tableau echoing in every broken shard. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Unseen Confrontation. The rain had turned Holbrook Avenue into a river of broken reflections. Julian Mercer stamped his boots on the slick pavement, water sluicing off his coat in rivulets. Every street lamp shuddered against the downpour, its halo flickering like a dying eye. He'd waited 3 weeks for this moment, and now, at last, the curator's final invitation had drawn him here. Detective Lena Ortiz crouched behind a battered sedan, hand on her holster. Agents are in position, she whispered into her radio. Canines on point, ready on your mark. Mercer nodded, wiping rain from his glasses. Stay sharp, he murmured. Then, without hesitation, he stepped into the open. Ahead, the derelict storefront of the old photographer's studio knelt beneath the storm. The boarded windows were scored with deep gouges, triangles inverted and upright, overlapping like the gears of some monstrous machine. Mercer's heart pounded as he approached the door, wedged ajar. Inside, a single bulb swayed from the ceiling, casting a pool of pale light over the wreckage. He squared his shoulders and slipped inside, every sense alive. The fanned out shards of mirror crunched beneath his boots, each fragment reflecting 1,000 Mercers, flickering, fractured, unwhole. As his eyes adjusted, he spotted her first. Lena, crouched by a curtained alcove, radio crackling in her hand. She offered a quick nod and melted back into the shadows. Then he saw the stage. A bare wooden chair sat under the dangling bulb, its seat stained dark. Across from it, on a makeshift podium, lay the curator's letter journal sealed with red wax, the symbol of inverted triangles. To Mercer's left, ropes coiled like serpents, and on the floor, a single mirror shard gleamed with cruel invitation. Julian Mercer, came the song. Julian Mercer, came the voice. Soft, measured, almost intimate. He didn't need to turn to know who'd spoken. You've come at last. Mercer drew his weapon. Show yourself. From the darkness stepped a tall figure in a charcoal gray suit, water beading on broad shoulders. The hood was down now, revealing a gaunt face framed by graying hair, eyes as cold and precise as a scalpel's tip. Bennett Rowe, the man announced, voice echoing of warped glass. You recognize me, don't you? Mercer's breath caught. Bennett Rowe, once a child in the unseen sessions, one of the four who drew blindfolded under Dr. Key's watchful eye. Mercer had thought Rowe vanished after that fateful day in November 1961, labeled unresponsive in the logs. No one knew where he went. You, Mercer whispered. I remember your drawing. Two inverted triangles joined at the base. Rowe's lips curved into a thin smile. I remember you too. The brave one who refused to see his own fracture. He took a slow step forward, hands relaxed at his sides. You healed. I I broke. Mercer's fingers trembled on the trigger. You killed for this? Rose's gaze flicked to the journal. To reveal every canvas, every body was one of us. Evelyn Harper, Mark Lowry, and soon you. Each a token to unearth the hidden wound legacy we all share. Mercer's pulse hammered as he closed the distance. Legacy? You tortured strangers to settle your own grievance. Roll laughed. My grievance was born here. He swept an arm to encompass the studio. Keys called it therapy. The curator calls it restoration. I study your closed files, your sealed memories. You hid behind your badge and credentials, believing professionalism could shield you. He crouched by the mirror shard, tracing its edge. Tonight, you look into this and see truth. Mercer raised his weapon. Step back! Instead, Roe extended the shard, its edge flickering like a blade. Look, he urged. Mercer's knuckles whitened. Somewhere behind him, Ortiz moved into position. He swallowed hard, fear and rage colliding in his chest. You think you're prepared for this? Roe whispered. But you never face what you refuse to see. A flash of moments, Ortiz leapt forward, gun raised. Roe's head snapped to her. In that instant, Mercer acted. He fired. The shot cracked like a whip. Roe stumbled, hand flying to his shoulder where blood blossomed on his shirt. He staggered, eyes wild, then sank onto an overturned photography stool. Mercer rushed to his side, heart thudding. Roe's hand clutched to the shard, rainwater mingling with his blood. He lifted trembling eyes to Mercer. Do you see? Roe said. We we are the same. Mercer gritted his teeth. No, he said, voice raw. You chose this path. Roe's gaze slipped to the center of the shard. For a moment, time froze. Rain pounding the roof, shards flashing in candlelight. Mercer's breath ragged. Then Roe's hand slackened, the shard clattering to the floor. Sirens wailed outside. Ortiz's voice crackled. We got him! Mercer stepped back as officers flooded in, cuffs snapping around Rose's wrists. He rose slowly, pressing a damp cloth to Rose's wound. Rose's eyes fluttered shut, exhaustion finally eclipsing his fervor. As Rose was led away, he called out hoarsely, Thank you for seeing me. Mercer swallowed the lump in his throat. He knelt, picking up the letter journal. He pried the wax seal and opened it to the final page. Rose's handwriting sprawling in spidery black ink. Victim 3. Name Julian Mercer. Date November 18th, 1995. Sin denial. Held a mirror of his past, yet kept his eyes averted from the ruin beneath. Mercer closed the journal and slipped it into his coat. He crouched and picked up the final mirror shard, its edge dull in his palm. He stared at its reflection, fragmented but whole. Detective Ortiz emerged from the shadows, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. His gaze lifted to hers, rain-streaked, resolute. It's done, he said. She nodded, relief softening her eyes. Let's go. Mercer stood, tucking both the shard and journal into evidence bags. Behind him, the House of Reflections fell silent, its gallery complete at last. He took a final breath of the cold, damp air and walked into the storm, no longer fleeing the past, but facing every shard of memory he tried to hide. End of book. We hope you liked this story. Please like and subscribe and come back soon for more murder mysteries and psychological thrillers.